So we have in the studio this morning some guests. We're going to be talking about hurricane preparedness. This is really an important topic, of course, because this is hurricane season. It started June the 1st, which was last week, Thursday, I believe. And, already we can see some systems developing, nothing really directly impacting us, but we've had a bit of rain in the area. And so we know, I think, in our hearts that you cannot, I don't know if there's such a thing as over preparing because you just don't know what's coming. So let's go ahead and invite some of our guests in. First, we've got Madam Jennifer Ahern. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on this morning. Happy Monday.
Yes, happy Monday. So Jennifer's Chief Officer from the Ministry of,
Sustainability and Climate Resiliency.
Yes, and climate resilience. Thank you so much. So we're going to be speaking to her on a number of topics this morning as well. We also have Mark, and I believe, Jennifer, this is actually your first time on the program. So a special warm welcome to you, and all of our CMR listeners are happy to have you here, of course. We've got Mark Cudling, I believe is the correct name, and he's the Flood Centers Project Sheltering and Emergencies Notification Manager. That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. That's a mouthful. It's really hazard mitigation specialist, to keep it simple.
We'll say that once more for me.
Hazard mitigation specialist.
Hazard mitigation specialist. There we go. All right. And he is being joined by Simon in the background there. And we've had both of them. I think, Simon, you've been on the program before, have you?
Yes, I've been on before. And I'm glad to be here again. Thank you.
Yes, perfect. And of course, everybody knows that hurricane season is here. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on doing at Cayman Mall Road and on this program is anytime there is a hurricane watch, warning, storm, we're going to be here with you and we're going to ride out the entire storm online with you as much as possible, bringing you updates and making sure you're aware of all the different notifications that are taking place across the island. So we've done a couple, normally Kevin Watler, in a previous life, he was a weatherman over at Cayman 27, and he always jumps in on the program, and we just try to keep it going because we know during a storm, y'all like a little bit of company, and why not? And so we bring that special for you every single year. So we do have Shamal Clark, who is also joining us this morning. So good morning to you, Shamal. And Shamal is the NOAA Storm Surge Model. Well, that's what he's going to be talking about. Give us your title, Shamal.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm a forecaster with the National Weather Service.
Got it. Forecaster. Oh, we definitely want to hear what you.
Not as complicated as Mark, no.
Okay. All right. Sounds fantastic. So let's begin, Jennifer, with you first this morning. So, you're here representing the ministry. Of course, when we think of things like, hurricanes, and we see every single year, I swear they come up with a list of, okay, this hurricane season is predicted to be, the worst we've had in X number of years, more storms than usual. And so they always do these projections. We're always thankful, and we say a little prayer when the projections are a little bit off. So we might not have as many storms as they predicted. I think last year was a little bit of a slower season. We'll get into some of the weather details here in a second. But a lot of us are not thinking, and we should be, climate change, climate resilience. All of these are kind of like new terms to some of us, but it's really, really important that we understand there's a much bigger and broader discussion here that has taken place around storms and weather systems. So from the ministry's perspective, what is the ministry most concerned about during hurricane season? What areas are you focusing on?
Well, like every season, I think the key message to everyone is to just be prepared. Listen to the experts that we have online today. In particular, we've got the Weather Services and Hazard Management. Both of those agencies have some great information available to the public, particularly Hazard Management. Preparedness is really, really key. One of the things that we're projecting to experience with climate change is rapid intensification of storms happening more frequently, which means that we'll have less time to respond when these things happen. So it's really, really important that everyone takes the time to familiarize themselves with the steps they can take for preparedness and actually takes those steps to become more prepared. And of course, just monitor all of the official channels, stay tuned to the weather services if an event is coming. Hazard management also pushes out some great information, and just have a plan. Know as a family what your plan is going to be if the weather is coming, if things are going to impact us, and be ready to execute that plan.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, there are some specific areas of concern, and we do have some video clips that we're going to play this morning from both the Premier and the Governor, who issued on last week their sort of hurricane messages, hurricane preparedness message. There are some specific areas, though, that we know are problem areas. So, for example, the North Sound Estates area, there's the Savannah Gully. Is there anything that you're aware of that is being taken in terms of mitigation for this upcoming hurricane season specific to those?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Awesome question there. Actually, we are engaging in an initiative. We started the groundwork, essentially, just to break it down for the audience.
Yes.
We're looking at implementing what we call flood sensors. So we have Savannah Gully as one of the areas earmarked, as well as looking at Randike as well. The key thing is early warning is one of the objectives we're trying to achieve. So if we can inform the public ahead of time, in particularly if there's rising water. So with this system we are putting in place, we're actually at the stage we're doing the design. So I want to take in a series of engineering drawings. We work closely with a series of stakeholders, and that's very important. We're not working in silos, so we work cross ministry. So we're working as closely with the Ministry of PI, in particular NRA, Department of Environment, of course, our colleagues from Weather, our key stakeholders, and the Water Authority. So what we're trying to do is really pull in the stakeholders who understand. And of course, one of the engagement we have started so far, especially in Randike Garden, is talking with the community and engaging them, because the community plays a critical role. They understand the risk, they experience it, and with their shared experiences, we're trying to design properly and implement these systems, whereby in real time, we are able to see the rising water, but in particular, we are able to inform the public ahead of time.
Wow. So this sounds interesting. Is this new technology? Can you tell us a little bit about what these flood sensors are?
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, if the term itself, IoT, Internet of Things, our phones, all of these devices are able to transmit information, right?
Yeah.
And what we are trying to do is essentially, the system itself has a what we call a cell modem. So we are able to basically transmit information. So it measures the water level. There are several ways of doing it, but in simple terms, we use a pressure sensor. So it measures the change in temperature and then pressure, and from that is able to ascertain the height of the water. So these devices will be placed pretty much in the ground, several feet in the ground, and actually we'll have these mounted on very robust infrastructure. And the good thing about it, with our ministry, we are pushing towards green initiative. So a big part of this will be solar powered. So there, in terms of the community concern of ensuring that there's no usage of actual on the grid itself, it actually gives a long battery power. So even in the times when we are out of power, this device is able to collect information. Use a small amount of power itself, and the information transmitted is in kilobytes. So it's pretty smart. And that information, we're able to share it with our first responders as well as weather service. And we're looking more in terms of long-term planning. What is the impact? So if we're to give a scenario, if there's a particular rainfall event, we could say rainfall X contributes to this amount of water or flood depth, that type of scenario. So it gives us the ability to really collect data. As you know, with the advent of AI, if you collect a lot more information, we're able to undertake modeling and have also incorporated our forecasting. So it's really looking at the future of where we want to go in terms of entities and the ministry and as Cayman Islands. I think on the cutting edge, I think there are a few countries who are implementing this. We see a few solutions like in Belize, but in terms of what we're doing in Cayman, it's pretty much groundbreaking work. And I think this initiative can really become what we call like a prototype or our best practices we could spread to our other overseas territories.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, congratulations on that. So that sounds wonderful. Simon, you're organizing obviously a lot of educational components. So I know last year you do the annual preparedness booklet. Will that be available again for people to pick up at various locations throughout the island?
Yes, thank you, Sandra, for that. Yes, we're going to be still using our existing. We've got a few boxes left of the last booklet So we will be updating it, but we've got quite a few left, and we will have them in the lobby. And whenever we go to events, we bring them along. And we have a children's booklet as well. But earlier you were speaking, Sandra, about your involvement with our seniors over the weekend. And in fact, we're embarking on a series of presentations for caregivers, starting actually on June 8th in a few days at Jasmine. And it's for sort of people in West Bay and Georgetown. We're going to be going district to district. But we recognize as we age, our ability to smell and hear and see and even touch and feel, we get less steady on our feet. And when we have hurricanes, we may lose power. So, there's a possibility people could be eating food that isn't still fresh. They can't smell that it's not good anymore. And we really want to make sure that the continuity of care for our seniors, our elderly, continues through a hurricane impact phase, that they don't sit there in their own homes or whatever on their own for days without any sort of support. So every district we're going to be going, we're going to be having some refreshments. We're going to be giving certificates to all the caregivers to come out. And then the next one is actually, 6:30 on June 8th at Jasmine, and it's free. And but getting the word out is critical, not just for our seniors, but the people that don't speak English as their first language. We know we have people from all over the world working in Cayman, and tourists and visitors. And so, there's a lot of challenges to it, but we come out and give presentations really to anybody, at day, at night, even if they want us to come in the evenings or weekends. Anyone, churches, businesses, government agencies, NGOs, and obviously our website, things like Cayman Prepared, our Facebook, and opportunities like being on your radio show with your thousands of listeners. So we appreciate that, Sandra.
Yeah, absolutely. So the program that you're talking about in relation to the seniors, it's actually like a training program for the caregivers. Yes,
quite often they are, they're completely really on the front line with the elderly person. So, we recognize that, people need at least 3-4 days of food to get through a hurricane. We also want to make sure that the caregivers themselves are riding out hurricanes in safe locations. We recognize that some seniors are, somewhat maybe feel a little bit of shame going to a shelter, say if they're wearing adult diapers or something like that. So we're trying to work on improving the areas of privacy. Obviously, we have to maximize the amount of space to get as many people in as possible. But we're also looking at, providing transportation through the NEOC. Once the NEOC is activated, again, with our stakeholders, recognizing some seniors may not want to go to a shelter, but could go to a family member or a friend's house that is strong and robust and up high enough to be safe from the waves and, of course, storm surge. So we're going to be looking at working with the emergency medical services and HSA to try to get people to other locations, not to just to shelters. So that's going to be something you'll probably hear more about when we're in the activation phase, when a storm or hurricane is threatening. But there's some evidence to show that elderly people don't do as well in disasters. Obviously, they don't have incomes, and they don't want to add to the burden of their family members often. So if their homes are damaged, often they're just sort of struggling along in the without electricity. Even a bag of ice for an elderly person is a heavy thing to get back to their home to keep their supplies cool. Putting up shutters, all these things are much more challenging as we age. So we recognize we need to try to do as much as we can. So the caregivers, we recognize, are very critical to that, because they can really make a difference to make sure that the elderly people, our seniors in Cayman, get through.
Very good. And what other vulnerable groups other than our seniors? We were talking about earlier animals, for example, livestock. I'm sure children probably fall into a vulnerable group. Anybody with special needs. So people need to start thinking ahead of how to deal with, like, what's the contingency plan if you do have pets. Do you know where the shelters are that actually accept pets and so on? So let's talk about some of those other sort of vulnerable groups as well.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. So, yes, government does provide the shelters, but what we saw in past events too is, some of the shelters are actually serve as schools as well. So when we have really big impacts, children are going, sometimes their schooling is interrupted. I think on average it was 40 days, obviously in Hurricane Ivan.
Yeah.
So we are a bit more robust, but we recognize the burden falls very much on single parents. Often they're struggling to put the home back together if it's damaged, as well as trying to stay employed, bringing in their income, and then trying to look after the children as well. It's a very stressful environment. And I think, our director, Danny Coleman, has recognized too that there's mental health components associated with disasters, and has tried to step up there. I think all of us were a little bit sort of that post-traumatic stress or whatever after a major impact. So, but I think, obviously tourists, we saw even after Grace, a number of tourists wanted to get off the island, but I think we had a couple of thousand who didn't get off. And, it's difficult sometimes getting the message to them, but we have a very effective group called the Joint Communications Service, and it worked very well in the pandemic. And it's a number of government communicators come together, speak with one voice. Tourism is obviously represented on that too. And, they have mechanisms in place to get to all the hotels, the Airbnb owners and things before a hurricane. But yeah, there's many groups of the foreign nationals. Obviously, some people consume information differently, so we use the consular agencies sometimes to get through to, some people, maybe the Filipinos aren't reading Compass or going on Cold Hard Truth. I'm sure they are, but, just to be on the safe side, we go through, the consular representative, because sometimes they have mail groups and so on, but we try to get to everybody. And to the point where we actually had a vehicle in the pandemic with a bullhorn on the back of it going through the communities. But it's not always easy, but we always talk about the mile road, and word does get around one way or another.
All right, 936-2626. If anyone has a question for a guest this morning, of course, the phone lines are open. We do have a question that has come in via WhatsApp. This person says, good morning, Sandy. Can you ask your guests what are the plans for updating the emergency notifications app to make it more user-friendly? Okay. Have you had any complaints about the app not being user-friendly?
Yeah, so one of the things, and let me just kind of break it down a bit. So with the app itself, unlike the typical...
And let's assume that maybe some listeners don't know what the app is. So
okay, sure, no problem. So the notification app, or what we call the NEMS, National Emergency Notification System, the app itself allows you to receive a series of information, but in particular, we focus on the app. Also, we have the SMS, email as well. But the big push is really the app. So with the app itself, there are 4 key steps. And I think what we're trying to emphasize to users is that unlike a typical app in which you download and you receive, okay, I've downloaded this app and it's working. This app has what we call a push notification. So there has to be a back end where the email or some registration is linked to the particular app or user. So in that case, it has to be a verification process, because what we are trying to do is not allow what we call dummy users on the system, right? So in persons who are trying to push, for example, fake telephone numbers and so forth, we're able to have that system in place. So the email is really used as a verification. So one of the key steps is really ensuring that you register via the website, and there's a section that speaks to the whole data privacy. It's very important, which persons need to ensure that they tick and submit. Once you're registered to the system, it asks you to verify your email address, and once you do that, it will therefore ask you to input the HMCI code, which is HMCI, which is what they call the organization code, and then from there you'll be connected. As I said, it's a particular app really used for several different entities across the world, in particular in the US. But the whole idea, basically, we're working with the vendors as well to make the steps much easier. Instead of having 4 steps, we could have 2 or 3. But the idea is the whole aspect of security and ensuring that there's authentication of users to the system. So that one's the basis why persons may find it challenging at time. But if you have any concerns, we always have our lines open, and our email address is NENS, that's NENS @gov.ky. We have a support line to help persons walk through. And I'm very happy you gave to this audience as well. We're going to do another marketing campaign about the app as well. We're pushing to persons and really engaging in sessions like these in terms of one-on-one sessions, different community groups we work with our, for example, our community emergency response teams, and that's very critical as well, reach to the communities. And if you have any questions, we're always open to serve the needs of the community.
All right, very good. So hopefully that answers that question. Everybody's saying good morning. Damaris joining us from New York. Miss Charlene saying good morning to Simon and everybody else. So let's talk about what the projections are for this year. I think, Shamal, you can probably help us with this one. What are we looking at? Is this going to be a more active hurricane season? How many named storms are they predicting for 2023?
All right, good morning again, everyone. So right now, the conversation is that it's supposed to be an average or just below average season. And it's just banking on the fact that they're anticipating a transition to an El Nino year. Now, the interesting thing about that is, and I caution persons with taking that information to say, there's also the fact of warm sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, and it's fairly warm. So even if we have an El Nino year, the chances are if it's not strong enough, then the warm sea surface temperatures will win. So I know NOAA went on a little bit of a caution side in saying 12 to 17 named storm possible, and they had a 40% chance of average and 30% above or below average. And I think the reason for the caution has to do a lot with the warm sea surface temperature as well as the strength of the El Nino. So while that is the conversation, I will just tell persons, treat it as any other season, whether or not it's an active season or not, because at the end of the day, regardless of the activity, it could only be one. And even if we have one, if we're unfortunate to be in the path of that one, then, things could go 0 to 100 real fast. And then, it's all downhill, and we're probably having another Ivan event, which I'm sure most persons would not want. So at the end of the day, it's just to be up to date with the information, have your preparedness plan in place. I know HMCI has some nice tips on Cayman Prepared. If not, I'm sure you could reach out to them directly to have that information provided to you. In the interim, I do stress persons to rely on our information versus alternative source of information. And I know you do share information as well, so thank you for that. One of the things that we find is that when persons share alternative sources of information, it's not always accurate, and the persons who are putting out the information aren't necessarily looking at the local effects. And again, there's no responsibility if they're incorrect. They don't take necessarily a big blame if they're incorrect, so they don't really necessarily focus on that nitty-gritty in terms of being completely accurate. For us, when they look at it from a global or a large scale point of view. Right. The National Weather Service, we try to transfer that, or at least translate that to a localized scenario. So you get your effects versus the North Coast, South Coast, East Coast, West Coast. You'll get that kind of dynamic in terms of storm surge. I know Simon is excited for storm surge, and it's the data that we'll get in probably a couple of years. It will definitely be a game changer in terms of the effects of storm surge has during the Atlantic hurricane season. But we try to estimate based on local knowledge and the information that we have on hand. Again, not every organization will do that, but we'll definitely cater our information for our customers, our users at the end of the day, and the persons in the Cayman Islands. So We do ask that if you're tuning into alternative source of information, please do refer back to the National Weather Service. And again, we might not rush to get our information out as fast as the others, but it's not about the first to get it out, but it's the closest to accurate. We are more concerned about accuracy in terms of providing with quality information so that you can prepare, you can respond in the event of a tropical storm event or a hurricane scenario. So again, we're not rushing to beat the other person or the competitor or the other persons out there. Again, everybody with internet and a smartphone and a camera knows an expert these days. So that's our battle, but at the same time, we want to stress the importance of relying on our source of information.
Okay, very good. And of course, we already have a first name storm for the season, Arlene. Came about last week. Didn't really, is that what was dumping some of the rain on us as well?
No,
she was a bit.
Not Arlene. Arlene was quite timid, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I'm kind of on the fence in terms of naming Arlene, and I see they have another area way out in the northern Atlantic that they're watching as well as of this morning. But we just had a trough signature that moved across the Caribbean. So that's another point that I probably should mention to persons. So with the past few years, what we've realized is that persons don't necessarily take heed to just normal weather conditions. They'll be excited if it's a tropical storm, even everybody is on it. However, there are several weather phenomena that could happen between now and let's say the end of November during the hurricane as a result of tropical disturbance or tropical wave, and just not a normal depression that could simulate somewhat of a similar effect as a named storm. So the idea for us is that we're going to be putting out severe weather bulletin that does not necessarily quantify as a tropical storm watch or a warning. However, it can give you the same results. And to put it into perspective, and Mark is here working on the IoT project, which is awesome. So let's say, for instance, Mark and his team recorded an inch of rainfall a couple of days before a tropical wave. And let's say the tropical wave did start to become a little bit organized into a disturbance. And you have gusty conditions of over 35 knots and so, which is essentially right in the tropical storm region, but it's a gust. And then you have rainfall total of probably another 2 inches. Then you have significant flooding. You could have damages due to wind. All that could happen in a case that is not necessarily a tropical storm. So the season is not just about tropical storms. So guys, don't just focus on the word tropical storm or hurricane. Please look out for severe weather bulletins as well this season.
Right. Yeah. Because honestly, we've seen things like even, I don't know if technically they were tornadoes, but where they do touch down, they're out to sea, and sometimes they might come inland for a little bit and touch down. And of course, that can cause some damage to trees and other structures and stuff as well. So it's important to pay attention to these things. Chief Officer Jennifer Ahern, of course, we know that you guys have some climate change policy meetings that are coming up. So can you give us a little bit more information on what those meetings are all about and how people can get a schedule so that they can make sure that they attend and participate?
Yeah, thanks. We're really excited to be out with a draft climate change policy, and we are looking to get feedback from the public on that. We started our public meeting last weekend, or the weekend before, not this past weekend, but the one before, in the Sister Islands. And this week we start our meetings here in Grand Cayman. The first one is tomorrow night in West Bay, starting at 6 p.m. at Sir John A. Cumber Primary School. Wednesday afternoon between 3 and 5 p.m. we're having a session that's open to students, which will be at the UCCI Multipurpose Hall, the Sir Vassal Johnson Hall. And then following that in the evening, same location at UCCI from 6 to 8 p.m. we'll be having a meeting for the public. On Thursday, we'll be in Boddentown at the Theoline McCoy Primary School. And then next week, Tuesday, we're in East End, and Thursday, we're in Northside. So you can find out all about the policy and download it at www.gov.ky/climate change policy. So you'll find the document there. You'll find the public meeting schedule. You can also follow our ministry on social media. We recently launched an Instagram page. We're on LinkedIn and we're also on Facebook. So please follow us there to get more updates. And if you have any other questions, you can email us at climate@gov.ky.
All right, wonderful. So tell us the importance really of the climate change policy. What's in it? What are we looking at potentially undertaken in this country?
So the policy is going to provide a framework for us to move forward as a country to look at how we're going to respond to climate change and how we're going to adapt and prepare. And the vision that we have, the draft vision in the policy, is a climate resilient Cayman Islands that promotes and sustains vibrant communities, a thriving natural environment, and a robust economy where people can live their best lives now and for future generations. And we've got three main goals that are proposed. One is to reduce Cayman's vulnerability and enhance our resiliency to climate changes. Two is to promote sustainable and low carbon economic activity. And three is to establish a governance framework for climate action, which is future focused, fair to all, accountable, and transparent. And then we have a number of objectives under each of those goals. So it's really to help provide a framework for government going forward across government to make sure that we're having that future focus. We're taking some of these concerns into account. We're already seeing some of the effects of climate change. We have evidence that shows that we have got increasing temperature. We've got sea level rise that's been recorded as well, and also the changes that we're seeing in the weather patterns. So it's not something that's, far, far off in the future. It's here and it's starting to happen. And we really need to make sure that we're taking the steps that we can to prepare.
Now, here's something that's really interesting. Just sort of a little, weather fact for you. We actually had a subtropical storm that occurred in January. And so there's some forecasters who are considering that to be the first cyclone of 2023 in the Atlantic Basin. So it didn't quite have a full name, but it was designated as, I think it's ALO 12023. So it didn't quite receive the name Arlene, as we saw that one was named over the weekend. But they say that, these subtropical activities are not unprecedented. They do happen. So this is where you have a storm outside of what is typically the hurricane period. But having a storm in January is quite unusual and quite rare. So something to always be mindful of is, although we have a quote unquote, fixed hurricane season, you can have subtropical storms that start before that period or even after the end of the hurricane season as well. So it's important to remain vigilant at all times. And the more that we understand climate change and how it's impacting weather systems, I think these subtropical storms may become more frequent as well. So the prediction this year is to have a normal hurricane season. So we'll see how that works out for us. I mean, we're hoping that it won't be anything severe. Now, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Ivan this year, I believe. Is that right?
2004. So is it 19 years or 20? I have this.
2024 is next year. So
next year. So it'll be
20. Yes, next year will be 20.
Yeah. But that's a great point you raised, because I think a lot of people are either too young to really remember what it's like, or we have lots of new people on the island. So
so one of the things. Yeah, sorry, I just want to get that point as you said it. So one of the things with the return period for major hurricanes, I believe it's somewhere in the order 20-25 years. So if persons look at that, then you'll say, well, Cayman is overdue for one, technically based on a return period potentially. But what I would like, and persons that are out there, media persons, the various media houses, definitely Sandra would ask this of you as well. There are persons on island, like Simon said, who've never experienced a tropical storm event before, and a lot of persons who have forgotten what they can do. So earlier this year, I attended the National Hurricane Conference, and they were talking about social sciences in meteorology. And one of the points they mentioned was that you probably can try to remind people when you're putting out messages, remind persons with probably a video or a picture of what happened. So in the event we're talking about a storm, a tropical storm, we could use a video from another place or another scenario in the Cayman Islands. A lot of times we try to bring it back home, or use a scenario when we're talking to better give persons a visual indication of what to expect, and not just say, okay, we're going to have these conditions. And then the other thing about the conditions, that we start talking about the impacts, not just the weather elements, rainfall and wind, but what are the impacts that these systems will have, and get more specific. The guys from HMCI would talk about exposure and vulnerability and so forth, and then we'll talk about hazard mitigation to reduce the risk associated with the hazard. So all of those kind of conversations we need to have once, probably before, to be honest with you, before an event. We don't wait until the event is upon us, but we have those conversations ahead of time, so that persons can actually reduce the risk associated with these tropical storm events.
Yeah. Okay, very, very good. Yes.
Sandra, thank you so much for having us on. And yeah, I mean, just looking back at it, I think, we obviously are more resilient now, but, we have to remember that because of our low-lying nature, on average, it's 7 feet above sea level. And that's, again, why climate change with the rising sea is kind of such a threat. But, 19 years ago, when that happened, 2 people died, 400 people were injured. The equivalent of 100 million vehicles, if it was in the US, were destroyed. About a third of all our vehicles were covered up by the sea. 80% of the homes were damaged, and had the sea water come into them. And it was startling for people. In many cases, obviously the waves were impacting the homes along the shore, but people quite far inland, like a couple of miles inland, were experiencing, 8 or 10 foot of water in some cases in their homes. And that's a threat for single-story dwellings, not just along the shore, but in these inland areas. So we constantly emphasize, the importance of getting to somewhere safe before the impact from one of these events, but particularly if you're not sure that your home is strong enough. And it doesn't tend to just come in like a trickle when the wind blows the water ashore in your direction. The water level can come up very quickly and very fast. Within a matter of minutes, it can go from, a garden with your grass in your car to several feet of water kind of coming up past your window. So particularly, if you've got children, elderly persons, these kinds of things, try to plan for this. The water may not be coming out of the tap. You may not have any electricity. The supermarkets may not be open. The gas stations may not be open. So if you can be ready in advance, do a little planning and preparedness.
Right.
Make sure you put shutters, water, non-perishable food, gas in your car, and so on. It can make a huge difference. A bit of planning.
And I mean, have your checklist. It's helpful to have that checklist and to go through it early and double check, because I find even with the non-perishable foods, sometimes during the year somebody ate the can of whatever, and it's no longer there, and you didn't realize that somebody in the household ate it or whatever. So go through and make sure that you check through and you see what you still have. If things like batteries, hopefully you haven't left them in the what do we call them, flashlights entire time, because then they get corroded. Maybe they're not working. You need to top up those things. So I think it's worth going through your list, doing infrastructure checks around your home, because things happen, buildings get older, and sometimes windows, for example, need to be sealed or resealed. I mean, we noticed during, I think it was one of the storms that we had last year, that we had some of our windows, and this is a fairly new build, but some of the windows just were not sealed properly. So we need to do some reinforcement there, because there's water actually coming through those. Looking at the foliage around your house. If you've got coconut trees, those coconuts become flying projectiles during a storm. So you want to be in a position to shake them down and make sure that, especially during hurricane season, that, you don't have those coconuts on the trees as much as you possibly can. There's just so much to be done. But if you start early enough, every week, every other week, you can kind of dedicate to looking at different aspects of your preparedness plan. You know, you've got dogs and children's, and you've got to make sure you've got enough medication on hand. Always keep the gas tank as close to full as possible during hurricane season. I know some of us like to drive on and empty during hurricane season. That's really not a good idea, but because normally by the time that you recognize that, oh yeah, I've got to get to the gas station, there's like a 2 mile long, line at the gas station. So water bottles, make sure you have enough water. There's just so much to think about, but I think that with adequate preparation, we can all be sufficiently prepared, right? And making sure you've got rechargeable devices that are charged up and ready to go, so that you can have a little bit extra life on phones and those types of things. We've supplied a lot of our listeners to the program with little portable radios now. Those are all rechargeable. Make sure that they're fully charged up going into any sort of a storm situation. So a few people in the comment section saying that they remember Hurricane Ivan, of course. Siobhan says that she does remember it. And she says it wasn't anything fun. Well, that's for sure. So, a lot of us, but it's like any other traumatic event, because I think Ivan was a traumatic event. Over time, our memories fade. And although we know it wasn't a good event, a lot of us don't quite remember all the details of how bad it was, and I think that's just the mind's way of sort of protecting us from trauma. But that realization that another Ivan could happen again, or it doesn't even have to be an Ivan, because we saw last year and the year before, we had storms that were like not even a hurricane that were ripping up trees. And it was just like, what on earth? How did this cause that much damage, right? So don't think just because, and I used to think this way, I was like, oh, when it gets to category 3, I'll be concerned. But that's not the case anymore. Obviously, we've seen storms that were technically not hurricanes, but had sufficient dust causing enough damage. And one good coconut tree falls on your roof and you've got a problem. So be very, very vigilant, folks, and make sure that you're on top of your hurricane preparedness.
Sandra, I've got a presentation at 9. I don't want you to rush off because you got some amazing guests on there. But I just wanted to thank you, and I appreciate what you said about keeping Cayman company with your show when an actual impact's coming, because that's important.
Yes.
Too. But yeah, we do worry a bit also that people kind of anchored to their previous worst experience and can't really picture the possibility of anything else. But, getting back to Ms. Jennifer's point with climate change, we're seeing kind of a new normal. Hurricane Ian, second, I think did over $50 billion worth of damage in 2021 in Florida. Obviously, Dorian, 400 lives lost in Bahamas. And Irma and Maria and things like that. So, let's not get totally... It's not complacent, and I worry too a bit about the people in the BRAC who went through Category 4 Paloma, which was a very small wind field, a radius of only 7 miles of hurricane force winds. And as Shamal will tell you, it's when you're in the sea, if you push your hand through the water, you don't make a very big wave. But when you get your whole arm out, when you've got a big wind field, that's when you get a lot of surge. So it's these bigger systems that ready, and they don't have to be Category 5 hurricanes to push water. But I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry I've got to nip out. I've got a 9 o'clock presentation, but I really appreciate you. Thank you, Ms. Sandra, and thank you, Shamal and Ms. Jennifer.
All right, beautiful. Just a few more comments, and then we'll start to wrap things up here in any event. So Damien says, remember now that we have close to 80,000 residents compared to 2004, where the population is 50,000. So can we talk a little bit about, that's a good consideration as the population is significantly larger. How does that change your plans in terms of what government is doing and their contingencies?
I could take from our side as a management, a big challenge there obviously would be in terms of shelter. So the capacity over the years have increased, and we're looking to increase it as well. I think that's one of the key concerns. The other aspect as relates to resources, food security. We are working closely with various stakeholders, in particular supermarkets, logistic food chain, in terms of ensuring that we have adequate supplies on island, and that's one of the key areas. In times of need, food, clothing, shelter is one of the key areas that we had to tap into. So in terms of the population numbers, we would have also worked with our colleagues from the Economic Statistical Office, ESO, and they provide us this number. So with these checks, obviously every 10 years we do the population census, but it gives us the ability to really do the planning, not just for HMCI from disaster preparedness, but also from the other ministries, which use this information to make their various planning and strategies going ahead.
Right. Very good. So we have another question here. Jamien's asking, will there be international airlines from other countries on call ready to evacuate pre-hurricane and also after? So what are the options for people? You know, good thing about hurricanes, I suppose, is normally we get some sort of warning. I mean, the tone of, you know, exactly where it hits might not always be precise until it gets closer. But are there normally any options? I know Cayman Airways will put on additional flights in advance of a storm if they can. We do have, I think, more capacity now as well. But do other airlines normally get involved in assisting with this?
So it's not my area expertise, but I'm going to give you in terms of the action plan that we have in house. So essentially within our NEOC, we have a cluster, I would call it the EST, Emergency Support Team, that focuses keenly on evacuation. So this is actually led by our colleagues out of the Airport Authority, as well as our colleagues from Cayman Airways as well. So there's an action plan in place. So as soon as we are issued a watch, that plan kicks in, and through the various media channels, obviously, including yourself, Sandra, as well, we would publish information as in the steps to take. So there is actually a team that focuses keenly on that area of ensuring that if persons wish to evacuation, whether it be a chartered flight as well, so that could be facilitated. This is the same, obviously, we'd have seen in terms of the pandemic, you know, we'd have seen such operations being taken place. So essentially, there's a game plan that's being led by a particular team.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. So,
yeah, and I think,
yes,
sorry, Sandra, I was just going to say, I think, you know, that's a good reminder for everybody. If plan A is to fly off, you need to have a plan B. Just in case you can't get off the island, in case things escalate too rapidly, in case, you know, I remember in Ivan, you know, people were talking about whether to go off or not. And then, you know, that Saturday morning we woke up and the 11 a.m. advisory had it coming straight at us and the airport was closed. So
exactly,
it was a complete change in the path. It was supposed to be going over Cayman Brac. So I think, you know, it's important to have that plan, to make sure that you have some contingencies built in around it, that if it is that your plan is to get on a plane and go off, that you do have something backed up behind that, just in case you're not able to get off. I mean, the team at Cayman Airways and the Airports Authority, they do an incredible job when the time comes, but there's only so much they can do, and they are constrained by if the weather conditions deteriorate. So, you know, and especially for some people who maybe are new to the islands, haven't been through a hurricane season before, talk to friends that have been through it. Make sure that you do take advantage of the information that hazard management has in terms of preparedness, and do have a plan.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much to our guests this morning. Again, we had Ms. Jennifer Ahern from the Ministry of Climate, Resiliency, and you'll have to remind me.
Sustainability and Climate Resiliency.
Yes, well, we'll get that name correct. Shamal Clark also joined us, the forecaster, Mark Codling. Of course, we had Simon Boxall as well. We'll be speaking to sort of the technical experts, I'm sure, as the season progresses. We've had a bit of rain. It looks like the skies have cleared up a little bit outside of my window anyway, here in Lower Valley, Savannah area. But, you know, check the weather forecast. Stay tuned again to all the official sites. We will share as we hear of anything that's happening in terms of weather alerts. We'll obviously share it to our audience as well. And we'll play the sort of presentations from both the Premier and Her Excellency Governor Jane Owen as well, which was issued last week at the beginning of hurricane season. So folks, the key message is really just to be prepared. You know, there's no need to panic or anything of that sort, but preparation is key, and really knowing how to go about that. And there are lots of resources that are available from government, from private sector. Just make sure that you avail yourself of all of that information. So thank you guys so much for coming on the show this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. Have a good one. All right, folks. So let's hear some messages now first we'll start off with the one from Premier Panton, and then after that we'll do Her Excellency Governor Jane Owen.
Business starts today.
All right, let me just back that up one second.
The 2023 Atlantic hurricane season starts today, the 1st of June, and will continue until the 30th of November. Over the next 6 months, every individual, family, business, and community in the Cayman Islands must take steps to be prepared, stay vigilant, and look out for one another in times of need. We are 1 year closer to the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Ivan, which devastated Grand Cayman in 2004. And later this year, we'll mark the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Paloma, which severely impacted our sister islands. But these so-called once-in-a-lifetime storms are becoming more frequent. Over the past 5 years, hurricanes like Harvey, Maria, Irma, Ida, and Ian have wreaked havoc across our region. Even when our islands are spared a direct hit, we feel the effects on our bank accounts as insurance premiums continue to rise. And our brush with Grace in 2021 taught us that even a tropical storm can cause significant damage. Being prepared is one of the most important things we can do to protect our families, our friends, homes, and businesses during hurricane season. As the old saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you have not already done so, now is the time to stock up on emergency supplies and make sure you have a plan for your home or business. If you are new to our islands or need a reminder, the Hazard Management Cayman Islands website, caymanprepared.gov.ky, has all the information and resources you need to prepare yourself, your family, your home, or business for a severe weather event. I also encourage everyone to download the free National Emergency Notification System, or NENS, mobile app. The free NENS app allows Hazard Management to send emergency alerts straight to you by email, SMS text, or both. Log on to nens.gov.ky to learn more and download the app. The NENS app is a prime example of the many official sources of information you can safely rely on during an emergency situation. We know how easily misinformation can spread during times of uncertainty. During a hurricane or other emergency situation, it is vital that you monitor official sources of information, such as Radio Cayman, Cayman Islands Government TV, Hazard Management, the National Weather Service, and the main government website and social media pages. Following Hurricane Ian, we developed a new protocol for WhatsApp voice note messages, so official messages can be shared via WhatsApp. We want to help you stay informed, especially when the situation is fluid and developing. But we need to make sure we are sharing verified updates. Misinformation, even if it is not shared intentionally, can waste time and resources and put lives at risk. Be vigilant, monitor official sources, and verify before you share. Although we often think of strong winds and rain as the most significant threats during a hurricane situation,
My apologies. Just 1 second. We've had to reload that video. So we're going to just re-add that back and try to
voice note messages. Misinformation can spread during times of uncertainty. During a hurricane or other emergency situation, it is vital that you monitor official sources of information, such as Radio Cayman, Cayman Islands Government TV, Hazard Management, the National Weather Service, and the main government website and social media pages. Following Hurricane Ian, we developed a new protocol for WhatsApp voice note messages, so official messages can be shared via WhatsApp. We want to help you stay informed, especially when the situation is fluid and developing. But we need to make sure we are sharing verified updates. Misinformation, even if it is not shared intentionally, can waste time and resources and put lives at risk. Be vigilant, monitor official sources, and verify before you share. Although we often think of strong winds and rain as the most significant threats during a hurricane situation, the sea can be especially treacherous. Even if your home is far away from the high crashing waves battering the coast, storm surge can cause severe, even life-threatening flooding up to hundreds of yards inland. It is important to know where the nearest hurricane shelter is to your home and have a proactive plan to evacuate your family from your home if you are at risk. As certain shelters have different guidelines for pets, for example, it is important to plan in advance. I want to thank the many shelter volunteers who go through special training to ensure these essential facilities are available to provide safe shelter during an emergency. I'm happy to announce that by the time we reach peak hurricane season in September this year, Hazard Management is planning to have thousands of additional shelter spaces available. I'm also pleased to confirm that the Kern Gomez Doppler radar has been restored to full working order ahead of hurricane season. In addition to the radar, which allows the Weather Service and the public to monitor meteorological conditions as far away as Jamaica, the Weather Service also uses the Cayman Islands GOES-R satellite system to monitor and track weather systems further afield. The government recognizes that efforts to increase short and medium-term readiness must be combined with longer-term measures to enhance national resilience. Earlier this year, the Cayman Islands government published the first Cayman Islands Climate Change Risk Assessment, the most comprehensive review of climate risks and opportunities to the Cayman Islands undertaken to date. We cannot keep ignoring the risks of climate change to our communities, our economy, or our environment. Based on local, regional, and global data, we know that there is strong evidence for an increase in the frequency and intensity of tropical cyclones since the 1970s in the North Atlantic. And projections suggest that strong hurricanes will become more common in the Caribbean. And this is just one of the climate change impacts our islands are facing. Local tide gauge data show sea level is rising. Local rainfall data suggests fewer but more severe rain events. Local temperature data shows our islands are about 2.2 degrees Celsius hotter than they were 40 years ago. The anecdotal evidence confirms these data points. Based on a survey the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency conducted last year, the majority of local residents reported noticing changes to local temperatures, rain patterns, storms, and coastal erosion. Climate change is not a distant projection. It is our reality. We are living with it now. As part of our efforts to ensure our country can continue to sustain future generations of Caymanians, the government recently launched the draft Cayman Islands Climate Change Policy for public consultation. The policy includes 3 overarching goals, 7 policy objectives, and more than 100 strategies designed to help ensure vibrant communities, a thriving natural environment, and a robust economy for current and future generations. To learn more, please visit gov.ky/climate change policy. At the beginning of this message, I urged you to be prepared, to stay vigilant, and to look out for one another. Community creates country. And in times of uncertainty, we need strong, healthy, and resilient communities more than ever. So, Cayman, let's be prepared. Let's get our emergency supplies together. And let's encourage our family, friends, and neighbors to do the same. Let's stay vigilant, monitoring official sources and verifying information before we pass it along. And let's look out for one another. Do not wait until after a disaster has struck to meet your neighbors or to find out who in the community, in terms of elderly, disabled, or vulnerable people, might need help. The only way we can get through hurricane season safely is if we work together. Thank you, and God bless these wonderful Cayman Islands.
Hello everyone. The start of the 2023 hurricane season is fast approaching, so I wanted to add my voice to the many others you'll be hearing, reminding us of the importance of preparing well for this unpredictable time of year. The long-term weather forecast suggests that this will be a near-average season, and that means that a tropical storm or hurricane could affect Cayman and disrupt our normal way of life. Reflecting on 2022 and seeing just how close devastating Hurricane Ian came to our shores, it's easy to see why this is really important. To help us prepare, we all need to understand the risks associated with hurricanes. There can be strong winds and heavy rain, but also high crashing waves and the potential for storm surge. Storm surge is a rise in the level of the sea which happens as storm winds push water forward. It can cause flooding, especially in low-lying areas. Once we understand just how much damage hurricanes can do, we can make a better plan to protect ourselves and our families. As a minimum, it's important for us all to think about which room in our house is the safest place during a storm. And if we are concerned that no place is safe, we need to know which shelter we would use. We need to stock up on non-perishable food and fresh water, enough for about a week for every family member. And I'm trying to remember Benji, my dog, so please don't forget your pets as well. Check on your torches and make sure that you have a good supply of batteries. And most importantly, we must all listen to the advice of the experts in hazard management Cayman Islands. This is my first hurricane season, so I'm doing all I can to prepare for every eventuality. For more information, please go to the excellent website Cayman Prepared, which you can see on this screen. Let's all stay safe. Thank you.
All right, folks. Again, some key messages there regarding hurricane season. So just be vigilant, folks. It's here, and we should all be taking this time